The Season 2 Finals is not just an ordinary championship in Japan. In fact, to get to this championship, you have to qualify through other championships. 240 people throughout the course of the last half a year have fought to get to this stage, and now they're one step away from Worlds. The people that I'm going to be showcasing in the next 5 videos that I'm going to be putting out are the top 32 matches from the Season 2 area finals. These people have all secured their spot in the Japan finals, which is going to be next month, which I will also be covering in the same manner. Additionally, in Japan, we have elementary schooler and middle schooler exclusive championships, and these also secure you spots in the area finals. We've never had anyone from the junior category qualify for the Japan finals until today. For our top 32 match, we're going to have Chichi on blue, yellow, Boa Hancock. This is the elementary schooler who got top 4 in the Junior Friendly Cup in Osaka, and he's going to be fighting against Mihawk. Mihawk and Boa are both exceptionally powerful leaders in OP14. Though they may struggle a bit in consistency, they have a ton of deck power to make up for that. And especially in these smaller tournaments where there's only 6 rounds and 240 people, you don't have to play through 9 or 10 rounds of Swiss just to make it to the finals. You just need to win 5 out of 6 games to make it to Top Cut. And in these more volatile formats, maybe it's good to just bring a more powerful deck rather than a more consistent and front-running deck like Emu or Ace. It's for that reason that actually in this tournament we had an insane amount of Mihawk, with actually Boa being the second most represented deck in the Top Cut. And so let's see how this matchup is going to go. 2 extremely prominent decks in OP14 facing off against each other. We don't know exactly who's going first or second quite yet, but we can see Mihawk's hand. Mihawk is seemingly running the Supernova version. Now Mihawk has a couple of versions to the deck, whether you run the 1 Gust Piranha exclusively as your searcher and focus more on the package that Bandai has decided to provide Mihawk, or you can play more towards the Supernova package, which gives you a little bit more consistency and power in the early game through cards like the 6 Cuss Law, as well as multiple searchers in the 1 Cuss Bonnie and the 2 Cuss Kid and Killer, but it sacrifices some strong cards that could potentially be helpful in the mirror, like 5 Cuss Carrot, like 9 Cuss Mihawk, for example. Still, because Mihawk has that 5 Cuss Bonnie in his hand, as well as the 2K Zoro, maybe he is going to be playing towards the Supernova version. How this is going to play out in the Hancock matchup, we'll have to see. Mihawk is going to be going first in this matchup, and Hancock has got second. Now looking at Hancock's hand, she has the 2 Cuss Hiyori in her hand, as well as a couple of cards that you would prefer to see out of Trigger. But we'll see how this really starts to stabilize, because Hancock is a deck that can live and die by the Trigger. Okay. As we get into game, Mihawk is going to start, and he has one simple play here. He has the 1 Cuss Piranha. He is just going to use that. Now, in this matchup, things have changed a lot throughout OP14. Hancocks can tech in things like Sables to get rid of the opponent's 7 Cuss Shanks, but really importantly, Mihawk is trying to find that 7 Cuss Shanks into something like the Law Beppo to make your leader 7k while the entire opponent's board is reduced by 1k, to just really make it difficult for the opponent to hit into your leader. However, he didn't see the 7 Cuss Shanks in his first search, is going to just pass it back. And Hancock is deciding to put out the Hiyori. So the Hiyori now lets you grab 1 life and put another card, usually with Trigger, to the top of your life. And what this does is a couple of things. Not only do you guarantee that you're going to get a Trigger out, but also it could potentially disincentivize the opponent from hitting into you, giving yourself a little bit more time. If you do get out that Trigger character, then it can be really, really annoying to deal with, especially this early. But Mihawk, unfazed, is just going to go for the 5k leader, and immediately the strongest trigger that Boa can have, the Gorgon Sisters. Having these 2 cards, the Hiyori and Gorgon Sisters, in your starting hand is an extremely explosive start, and once you get more characters on the board, that Gorgon Sister is just going to get a ton of value over the course of the entire game. Still though, Mihawk, this is probably the best play that you can have on this turn. If you start with a 1 Cuss Searcher on 1, and then just next turn, if the opponent's leader is a 5k leader, you could just go 5-5 to get a little bit of damage here. And in this way, he was able to get 1 life as well as 1 card out of his hand. So that is why he decided to hit life rather than just slowly chip away at board, waiting for the opponent's triggers to become weaker. And Hancock deciding not to wait either, immediately resting the 6 Cuss Gorgon Sisters, and putting up the Boa Hancock as well. This is going to reorder the top 3 cards and attach 1 Rested Dong to her leader to hit for 6k after this. Now, resting the Gorgon Sisters can be a little bit scary in this early game. If the opponent takes it back, then you just lost one of your really powerful cards, and technically because you put it in your life with that 2 Cuss Hiyori, you're losing a lot of value. So By putting down this 4-cost Hancock, who is a blocker, it basically nullifies that possibility of the opponent taking back your Gorgon Scissors, especially in this matchup, because Mihawk really doesn't have a way to get rid of the opponent's board effectively. So therefore, even though this Gorgon Scissors is rested right now, it isn't going to be a huge issue. And now, with that Gorgon Scissors effect, Hancock is going to hit for 7k, getting rid of the first life from Mihawk. Mihawk now, on 5 dong, what does he have in his hand? He has the 5-cost Bonnie from the first turn. He has the 5-cost Perona as well, a new card in OP14, which is going to lock 2 characters, and it seems like those are his only targets. He probably would have preferred to have something like the Tashigi, just the more standard play on this turn. But thinking about playing down the Bonnie, now Bonnie can lock a character or a dong card, and potentially by putting this down and locking the opponent's dong, you can mess up their curve if they potentially are trying to go for the 6-cost Kuma. He does decide to go for the Don Luck, but doesn't seem like it's going to hurt Hancock all too much because he just doesn't have that 6-cost Kuma in his hand. Still, plays down the Bonnie, rests it with the leader effect. Immediately you get 3 dong back and hits with leader. And in response to the free block taken from the 4-cost Hancock, Mihawk decides to stun both of the characters on the board with the Luffy event. Now this Luffy event, very similar to Electrical Luna, but on top of being a Supernova card, which would make it very searchable through all of the means in your deck, is also quite versatile as well, as although technically the main effect isn't as powerful as Electrical Luna, the card has an added benefit of having a counter effect. So just using that card to make sure not only that the opponent's not going to get as many attacks in the next turn, but also importantly that that 4-cost Hancock is going to be rested, meaning that it's going to be much easier to take out the Gorgon Sisters should he choose to. Now, whether or not he actually wants to do so is going to be another question, because hitting into that Gorgon Sisters is going to proc Boa Hancock's leader effect now that there's Dong attached to her. Still, getting in all the attacks that he can, that 5-cost Nami, which isn't out in the West yet, even though OP14 is out due to it being an EB03 card, putting in a lot of work just getting Mihawk's life total lower and lower from this very early stage. Now, does Mihawk decide to take out the Gorgon Sisters? Because his life total is already relatively low, does he really want to take that risk, or does he just want to try to accelerate the pace of the game? Starting out with the stage, on play, draws 1 card to just filter through your deck a little bit more, and thinking what he wants to do with the rest of his dong. Unfortunately, because he paid that first dong on this 7 dong turn, that means he won't have the 7-cost Shanks, which is going to really hurt in this matchup, because with all of those small attacks on the board, that's the card that you wanted the most here. Attaches 1 dong to Bonnie and hits for 7k at leader. Seems like he's just going to ignore the Gorgon Sisters, and the second trigger, Dang, another very good trigger, and activating Boa Hancock's leader effect is going to draw 1 more card as well. Just this Rung and Gorgon Sisters on the board is going to get so much damage, and although Mihawk is going to be able to lock 2 characters in the 5-cost Nami as well as the 4-cost Hancock, there's still so much damage on Hancock's board right now. Mihawk attaching 3 dong to his leader, thinking where he wants to go, and it seems like he's going for leader, just deciding that there's no way he can really win a war of attrition taking out the opponent's board. He needs to make sure he ends the game before the opponent does. 8k into leader. Chichi is thinking about what he wants to do about this attack. If he takes it and it's another trigger card, he can push out that Hiyori, but then he'd go down to 1 life, and his hand really doesn't have that much counter in it. But still, 8k is a really big attack. He'd have to use all the counter in his hand. Takes the life and decides what he wants to do for it. Decides to put it to hand. That is Perfume Femur. The trigger would draw 1 card. Decides that it's more important to hold onto it just for the main effect. Now, in this matchup, Mihawk doesn't really run that many blockers, so potentially holding onto it in hand, just valuing the safety net that may provide if Mihawk is running some surprise cards, just valuing having that card over just filtering through your deck. Maybe it would have been better to use the trigger, just because I don't think you really need it in this matchup, but better safe than sorry, I guess. Still though, now Hancock at 8 dong is going to replace that Hiyori and plays down the Kuma, which he was able to find off of the draw from his leader effect the turn before. He's going to trash 1 card and heal 1 life. So now, although he was at 1 life, back to 2 now, and still feeling relatively healthy, because although Mihawk is managing to deal with the opponent's board in terms of negating their attacks, his board isn't really getting that much stronger. He didn't have the 5-cost Tashigi, he didn't have the 7-cost Shanks, and now he's facing down a full board of blockers and attackers that Hancock has at disposal, all with Dong on them. all ready to attack. With that Gorgon Sisters effect, if you show 3 Amazon Lily or Kuja Pirates type cards, then you can attach a Rested Dong to all of your characters. Still, choosing to only attach it to the relevant characters in the Rang, Gorgon Sisters, as well as Leader to just make sure that he has as much Dong at his disposal as possible. Decides to go for the 7k with Rang at Leader and Mihawk staying healthy, countering with the Zoro. Uses a 2k, 1k. The attacks may potentially only get bigger from now on, so just trying to stay as healthy as possible. Another 7k from Gorgon Sisters, and this is one of the things with Mihawk. Yes, he has a lot of strong cards in his deck, but when the opponent gets a lot of small damage on the board and starts pelting you down, it can really struggle. You can really struggle to clear out the opponent's board. He does still have 2 2ks, a 1k, and a counter event in his hand, but decides to take the 7k, thinking likely the opponent's not going to hit with anything more than 7k, and he would be correct. Hancock goes for one more 7k, which Inari, Green Mihawk, decides to just counter with Dead Man's Game. The turn comes back to Mihawk, and now he's in a really tricky spot. That 4-cost Hancock now active is going to be in range of Hancock's Leader effect. If Mihawk really hits at anything that's 6k or higher and Hancock decides to block at the correct timing, the opponent's going to be forced to take 1 life to their hand. And Mihawk already being at 1 life, and with so many potential attacks on the board from Hancock, that 1 life is going to be extremely valuable. So Mihawk needs to decide exactly how he wants to deal with this board. He does have the Human Drill in his hand that can actually move that blocker should he choose to use his Leader effect on that. But right now, with so few cards in his hand and the opponent have so many attacks lined up, it doesn't feel like there's too much you can do. Now, after using this Kid Killer, he no longer has the ability to use that 9-cost Mihawk even if he uses Leader effect, as after you use your Leader effect, you can't play characters, so he has to think what he wants to do with the rest of his Dong. He does have the 6-cost Law in his hand, so potentially he could just try to stall a little bit more. He could play out the 6-cost Law to replay out the 5-cost Perona, plays it out, let's see what he decides to do with it. If he decides to pick up the Kid Killer, no, it looks like he's going to do for, yeah, so he decides to go for the 5-cost Perona here, and by putting it technically back to hand and replaying the Perona immediately off of the 6-cost Laws effect, he can reuse the on-play effect, once again making so 2 of the opponent's characters cannot be rested. And importantly, because they cannot be rested, that means they also can't block, meaning that although this 4-cost Hancock was a big problem at the start of this turn, now he's not in fear of the opponent potentially using that block effect into the Leader effect from Hancock to make the opponent go down to 0. Electing not to attack with the Perona at all, to not even give the opponent the chance to counter with that play, decides to use the 6-cost Law first, making it so that the 4-cost Hancock cannot be arrested, and then attacking with this Bonnie. 7k at Leader, just consistently trying to get these attacks to go through, just trying to survive one more turn, and hopefully, potentially with that Human Drill in hand, be able to get that last bit of damage to actually close out the game next turn. Is it going to be enough though? Deciding what he wants to do with his Leader. Reaches for 3 Dong and puts it all on his Leader. 8k at Leader. Opponent still can't block and is forced to use counter to make sure that attack doesn't go through. Hancock also trying to stay at 1 more life, electing not really to rely on triggers because the board is completely full. Now, if Hancock was deciding to go for lethal on this turn, you could actually make the argument that he should take that attack. Because although you have a full board, 2 of them cannot be rested, it also means that they can't attack as well. So if you were to trigger out a character and potentially remove the 5-cost Nami or the 4-cost Hancock, although a little bit less ideal, then you would have 1 extra attacker on the board. Still, the fact that he decided to counter that attack, maybe he's thinking about going for another turn. He does have that 9-cost Hancock in his hand, and with that card in hand, he may be able to pull out 1 more turn, and if the opponent's at 0 life, Mihawk just won't have 1 more turn. If he plays that 9-cost Hancock, goes up to 2 life, and potentially just tries to clear the opponent's board, would he be able to? I feel like at that point, no, you definitely just go for Leader, that's my bet, because the opponent would be at 0 life. So the question then is, would he actually be able to survive if he plays this 9-cost Hancock? He doesn't have any counter events in his hand, making it a little bit tricky, and the opponent does have several attacks lined up, and with things like Dead Man's Game, with things like the Human Drill like we see in his hand currently, and all of these small attacks and extra dome that you get from your Leader effect, Mihawk does have a lot of damage that can come out. So Chichi needs to decide if he wants to go for lethal right now or if he wants to try and survive 1 more turn with the cards and knowledge that he has at his disposal. Currently in his hand though, he has Nyomba is a 1k, Grandma Nyong in English, my apologies. The two Hancocks and Margaret are 0. And it's hard to see the other cards in hand. There's still the Perfume from the trigger. Resting 9 Dong is going to go for that 9-cost Hancock and deciding what he wants to move out of the way. Moves the Nami that cannot attack. Opponent's not going to hit into that to trigger the on KO effect anyways. Uses the 9-cost Hancock, gains 1 life, and makes Mihawk draw his final life, now at 0. And also importantly, because Hancock now has a ton of rested Dong, he can very effectively use that Gorgon Sister effect to get a lot of Dong and just start hammering damage into the opponent's leader. Still deciding what he wants to do. Goes for the 7k first, decides not to use the Gorgon effect. Does he have enough cards? Yeah, he does have enough cards to use it if he chose to. But starts with the 7k, electing not to use any of the effects that he has at his disposal quite yet, seeing how Inari is going to respond to this 7k attack. And he needs to respond because he's at 0 life now. He no longer has the option to take a life or play it differently. He needs to counter every single attack on the board, and he just simply may not have it. Counters with 2k, 1k. Now hand is down to 5 cards. Hancock with 3 more attacks on the board in the 2 characters and your leader against the opponent's 5 cards now decides to use the Gorgon Sisters effect. Shows Grandma Nyong, Perfume Femur, as well as the 9-cost Hancock to attach Rested Dong to the 3 characters. Can still use that Dong effect as well to pump up the damage a little bit more. Decides to go for the 6k first at the opponent's leader, seeing if he has 2ks. Mihawk is a deck that doesn't run that many 2ks. He has so many cards that feel required to play in his deck that these smaller attacks at 6k or 5k can really start to hurt with time. So luckily, though, for Inari, he does have a couple of 2ks in his hand, so he won't be exposed by this weakness. Defends the first one. Chichi deciding to go for the 6k with the Gorgon Sisters. Once again, Mihawk, a deck that really can struggle for 2ks, and Chichi deciding to check if the opponent actually has any left. With Mihawk's hand getting quite low, it's easy to assume the opponent may start to run out of these cards, especially with how the opponent has been countering against these 7k attacks. Hasn't really been using events, and if you can get the opponent to use an event on this 6k attack, you'd feel very happy. So that's why I think that he's going for the 6k attack. But the unfortunate reality is that Inari unfortunately just doesn't have a counter event in his hand and is going to be forced to use the human drill. He really wants to hold on to this human drill though. Thinking about actually potentially just going for the block with the 6-cost Law into the 1k, but depending on how the opponent hits after that, you just lose. I think you are forced to use your human drill here. And unfortunately though, that is going to lose your way to get over the opponent's blocker. It's the only way to survive right now. Uses the human drill for 2k to defend against the 6k attack, and now, regardless of how Hancock decides to attack here, is going to be able to be blocked by Law. Decides to hold up 1 Dong, potentially hoping for a counter event from Trigger, but that means that it is going to be defended by a block plus 1k from Law. That is going to give Mihawk 1 extra attacker because anything else he would have had to block completely with that Law. And let's see now if Mihawk has enough. He lost that human drill, so he doesn't have that way to get over the opponent's 4-cost Hancock. But what did he draw on this turn? Does he have enough damage? Oh, he drew another Law Beppo. So technically speaking, he does have a way to get over this 4-cost Hancock. You just need to rest the opponent's Hancock at the cost of 10. With your lead effect, you do get 3 Dong back, but that's extremely expensive. It may just be mathematically better to just go for lethal with the boards you have on board. But because his board right now is only 6k, 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 and his leader, technically though you can use this Kid Killer as an attacker, it's only a 2k attacker. And with the opponent having a blocker and 2 life, you need every single attack to go through. With that Dong up as well, potentially treating Mihawk with a little bit of his own medicine, bluffing that 1 counter, saying, I have enough counter in my hand to deal with whatever you have, so don't even try. And finally, this Perfume Femur may actually come in handy, because now that the opponent has a blocker, and also he knows that it exists because he showed it with the Gorgon Sisters effect, Mihawk needs to finish the game on this turn right now, and he's trying to see exactly what the best way to do that is. Thinking about going for the La Beppo play, decides to go for it. So he will not be able to defend the next turn, but potentially this may just be the best way, because this does technically give you more attacks, and if Hancock is suffering for counter in hand, this just gives them less opportunities to be able to absorb a damage with easy means like blockers. Now where Mihawk need to get every single attack through to actually have lethal, he can afford one of these attacks to be blocked now. Goes for the 7k first, and Hancock decides to take it, puts it straight to hand, but it is going to be a counter event. So the one dong that he left up for his at the end of his turn is going to actually be relevant. Does have the counter event now and is going to immediately use it for one dong to bounce back the Gorgon Sisters. Another 2k in hand now. That trigger essentially, or the card from life essentially gave him 6,000 counter. And with that 2k and the 1k from Nami, he is going to have enough counter to be able to defend against this attack. And now, even though the opponent has this last Mihawk attack that is 7k, because Hancock was able to defend against 2 of the attacks, it's not going to be enough. And Hancock is going to be able to take this game. Refreshing now for turn, but with Hancock all over dong at his disposal, and Mihawk nothing left, 2 cards in hand, 0 life. It's going to be 10 dong on 9 cost Hancock for 20,000 at leader, and Chichi, our junior friendly cup representative, is going to make it to top 16.